Hello. Today I'm speaking with a woman who has been photographing the protests, Yana Early, and she's based in Seattle. She is a mother of two. She basically considers herself a lifestyle photographer. She photographs a lot of different things. The protests started, and she made the decision to get in there and start creating these historical shots for the media and for her own records. Here she is. Nice. It says connecting. Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Okay, now I'm
Sorry, it was causing some trouble. I'm not sure what was
No.
going on. But can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm so
Good.
happy to talk to you.
Yeah,
Thank
same.
you for making the time. Have
Of
you
course.
been, how many protests altogether have you been to in the last couple weeks?
Well, I'm actually in my car right now because I'm about to get out and meet my daughter and some of our friends and her friends to go do a family-friendly one. But this will just be my third, honestly.
Yeah.
It's hard to get to all of them whenever, I have the two kids, and I'm just, yeah. So this will be my third.
Yeah.
I'm about to meet them as soon as we're done.
How did you decide which ones to go to? Was it like just when you had time and they're just pretty much all the time happening, or what do you look at?
They have been happening about 24/7 for the last week. I mean, obviously it spreads, people kind of spread out and move along around 3 a.m. in the morning, I guess, but there were people there 24/7 at different places throughout Seattle. So it's kind of just based on when I have time,
Yeah.
when my husband can be with the kids, and he's also been going. So he's been to a couple as well. So we just kind of bounce back and forth. The
Is
first
he
one
also
that
a photographer, or is he carrying your stuff and helping you out, or what do you do together?
Oh, we haven't been able to go together because
You've been taking turns.
Right, we had to take turns.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've had some friends come with me, and one friend has been able to help with kind of carrying my stuff and that sort of thing. Yesterday I just went by myself during the day.
Are you seeing kids, or like what did you was it very clear to you that you wouldn't want your kids to be there?
The first one that I went to, I did not take my kids just because I didn't know what to expect. I mean, full disclosure, this is the first time that I've done anything like this. I've never photographed things like this. I've never even been to a Black Lives Matter protest. I mean, this has all been a very new thing for me, which is, I mean, I hate to even say that, but this is very new. So the first one I did not take my kids to. This is the first one. Today my daughter's going. Tomorrow's my son's birthday, so he's having a birthday party right now with some little boyfriends, and then me and my daughter are going to this protest with some other friends. I have seen some kids. There have been some kids there, a few of them. There was even one photo I got of a mom with a little baby and, her baby Bjorn.
Yeah.
But then there's also been a lot of danger that I wouldn't necessarily want.
Yeah. Did you consider the protests violent or peaceful that you photographed so far?
The ones that I've been to have been peaceful in terms of what the people have been doing, but I will say the cops they're not always doing what they are supposed to, in terms of what I think that they're supposed to be doing, which is why we're protesting this and why we are calling for reform and in these protests. For instance, the first time that I went, it was my friend Natalie and I, and everything was fine, and all of a sudden they threw flashbang grenades in the middle of the crowd, and everybody ran. We had to run. Nothing was happening. Had I not been there and experienced that firsthand, my very white, privileged self, in the past would say, surely there was something going on. You just didn't see it. But there was nothing going on.
Yeah.
Nothing. It was very peaceful and fine. And then all of a sudden, I guess just to control the crowds, which there was no reason to, they started throwing 3 or 4 flashbangs, and we had to run. And Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, truly, had I
Yeah.
not gone, I've actually learned a lot through doing this, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to go was to learn and see what was going on.
Right.
Yeah.
Aside from the grenades, what other things did you see that you felt weren't appropriate on the part of the police?
You can just tell through their voices and the way that they speak to each other that they're just as scared as a lot of people who are in the crowds are, which in my mind they need to be further trained than that, you know. I when they would call out to each other and try to get each other into line, they would you could hear the fear in the voice. They didn't know how to they didn't know what to do for a while. The other thing, and this is one of the stories that I really do want people to hear. When I went yesterday, I went when the crowds were very small. There were maybe 30 people at the barricade, but I've been watching this live feed from an apartment complex every night, and this is how I see them still out there at 3 in the morning. But it's right above the line between the cops and the protesters. And I can tell you stories from that, too, that I've seen where they've done things that they should not be doing as cops. But yesterday I was there, and I was looking around, and, of course, there were some African Americans there, and then there were some other people that you could tell had just been there for days on end, just giving it all they have. And I thought to myself, I know that even though everybody, because I asked one of the protesters, I said, can you go to this around the line to the other side of this barricade? And they were all going, oh, no, 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 you can't do that. And I literally thought to myself, because I am a white woman that grew up with privilege, I bet you anything I can without getting hurt and without them saying a word. So I was like, I'm just going to try it. And so I walked to the edge of the barricade and kind of walked around and held up my camera and pointed at it like, can I come take a picture on this side? And they kind of just looked at me. So I just kept walking. Like I just went right past the barricade around to the other side where we're not
Wow.
supposed to be. And I knew they wouldn't do anything. And that is not, African American people don't they do not have that experience, and I
Yeah.
know that they don't. I've heard my husband's best friend, and of course one of my friends, he's in Atlanta, huge African American man that used to play for the NFL. He's a pastor now. He will talk about how his dad told him, and I'm sure you've seen the stories on, Instagram, but how his dad told him and how he's going to have to tell his son, you can't just walk in to a store and pick up things and look like you're, could possibly be stealing it, as a black man. But I knew yesterday that I could walk on the other side of that barricade and they wouldn't do a thing. So I walked around to the other side, and a cop got out of his car and came over to me because there was about 10 cop cars on the other side, and then some other cops lined up on the other side of those.
Yeah.
And I just said, hey, can I come over here and take a picture? He said, you're not supposed to be on this side of the barricade, ma'am. Like, spoke really kindly because
Right.
I'm white. And I said, I know that. I just would like to take a picture from this side of the barricade. He goes, oh, okay, yeah, that's fine. So I went over, took pictures from that side of the barricade, and then walked back to the other side. And, like, the protesters were blown away. They said nobody has been able to go to that side of the barricade without them.
Wow.
But I knew that I could do it because that's
Right.
what I've lived with.
It's a really interesting example you're giving, because I don't think people of any color have felt that they're totally safe from the police right now. But I can feel like your confidence in that moment. You were like, I trust that I won't get hurt.
Yeah. And I did, and I don't know if I would try to do that if things were crazy.
Yeah.
I knew, like, at that moment, I knew things weren't crazy. But I also knew that I could walk right up to them on the wrong side of the barricade and they wouldn't do anything. They wouldn't attack me. They wouldn't spray me. They wouldn't.
Yeah.
And that shows a massive difference.
Yeah.
Between the experiences that myself as a white woman has versus what the typical African American has.
What surprised you about the protests?
I think that, honestly, like watching how the cops have thrown flashbangs when they don't need to, watching how, a woman dropped her umbrella that she was trying to protect herself with from the pepper spray, and it was right there at the line, so she was maybe 2 feet from the cop in front of her, and he grabbed it, and so she tried to kind of just pull her umbrella back to herself, and then that's when they unleashed more pepper spray all over everyone. And it's right. I mean, it's all on video. And then they threw more flashbangs. So I think that has what has surprised me the most, because in my experience with cops, I don't have the experience. I have cops doing what they're supposed to. That's my experience.
Mm-hmm.
So my white self has gone into this and has been very shocked by
Mm-hmm.
what I've seen from the cops, and very disappointed and brokenhearted, and absolutely brokenhearted.
You mentioned like some protesters, you were like, you know, you could tell they'd been there for days. What is the image of that type of person protesting in Seattle? I mean, do they have like a tent nearby? Are they like, you know, you can tell their hair is not washed? Like what is it like a protester like that?
I mean, where are you currently?
I'm in Seattle.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, you know, Seattle has quite a few just very grungy people. I hate to even I live here, so
yeah.
So just they had their camps kind of set up, I think, elsewhere, but they'd been there day in and day out, and you could tell because they had everything so well organized.
Yeah.
There were, you know, medical stations set up. They were like, the protesters were helping direct traffic. I mean, they had it dialed in.
Yeah.
So they had just been there, and they knew each other. Anytime people were walking by, they were waving and calling each other by name. So you could tell they've just been there day in and day out, because they're running the place, they're helping, they're bringing in supplies, they know who to contact. Everybody knows who they are.
Did you find most really people at the protest were wearing masks?
Yes. It's been, I mean, I felt really safe, actually. I mean, of course, I'm using hand sanitizer and doing all the things. I even actually, you know, Seattle has a free site for free COVID-19 testing, so I've requested my appointment to go get that, just because I want to be on the safe side from being at several protests. But everybody is wearing masks. Like, I'm even watching people walk by now going to this protest, and they're all wearing masks.
Yeah.
For sure.
What had you
I mean, they're close. Everybody's super close.
You said you had been following a friend who has like a camera from her balcony at the center of Seattle. And so you're aware that the police are stationed 24 hours and that there are protesters 24 hours. Mm-hmm. What have you been seeing that surprised you on that footage that your friend is sharing?
Well, first of all, she's not my friend, but I've just found her on Facebook. It's Jessica Frost. I'm sure several have. I mean, sometimes there's like 6,000 people watching on her Facebook Live. She just keeps a live running. I mean, again, it's just been the reactions of the police that have shocked me, and that's because my experience with police throughout my life has not been bad. The experience has, for the most part, been good, which is the opposite of what is truly going on. And my eyes have been very open to the truth of police brutality. But then also, it's surprising to see how many people are there 24/7. That is amazing to me. Yeah. I'm so proud of my city right now, actually.
Nice. I feel curious about how you've interacted with the police throughout your life, because I mean, it's interesting that you describe it as you've had good interactions. My experience is I just have tried to avoid them. Like, if I see the police, I kind of like button up my shirt and keep walking and try to be polite and stay away. But I can't say that I've used the police proactively.
I guess I wouldn't say that I've used the police proactively, but they've never been unkind to me. And I've photographed events like music and stuff, and there's always police there. And if I just walk by and smile and show my camera, they let me go wherever.
Right. And you're becoming aware that that's not the experience.
No, it's not. Yeah.
Did you encounter anybody who didn't want his or her photo taken?
Yeah, for sure. And I try to be, mindful of that, definitely. Because generally I'm having people sign waivers for me to take their photo, whenever I set up a shoot. So this is definitely not a waiver signing situation.
Yeah.
So there's, like yesterday, there were maybe 30 people at the barricade. So I just kind of walked around saying, hey, I'm here to take photos. Does anybody have a problem with your face being in these? If so, I will very much be mindful of that. And that's another thing that interesting is I know that I'm a trustworthy person, but I know it takes work to earn somebody's trust, and I think you should earn it. I don't think trust should just be given. So there's a real, like, I care. I really care about the people that I'm photographing and why they're there and who they are. Even when it's a paid shoot and I'm shooting a model or a musician, I so care about them and want them to be comfortable. So that is in me as a person first and foremost, but definitely as a photographer. But there have been people who have said, yeah, I don't want, even yesterday there was a woman, I said, you have my word, I will not. And I know she's just having to trust that. So I feel very honored that people allowed me to walk around and do that. And there were a few images that I got where I feel like the face was too exposed that I'm never going to use.
Yeah.
So I don't
because I mean, it's a scene of motion too. So I mean, how often do you get to ask the group, like?
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things. Like if you look at my photos, most of them are from behind, or they're kind of in the distance, and they've got their mask on, thankfully. So that kind of helps in this situation. So there's not been, when it's a group and it's movement and it's massive, which is a lot of my photos, no, I can't necessarily go around and ask. But if it's people right around me, I just kind of make aware, hey, I'm shooting. If you don't want to be in this, maybe move to the other side, but I want to capture the general idea. So I definitely want to be respectful. I could care less if I don't get to use an image. Like that doesn't.
Yeah. I'm curious I'm curious what you've been seeing in terms of photojournalism of this moment and of the protests. Is there any image that has really stood out to you among the work of other photographer peers or photographers?
Yeah, there's one guy here from Seattle. His name is, his Instagram handle is, I think, JMD Creative or JM Creative or something like that. Yeah. I wish I knew his real name. That's terrible of me. But his work is amazing, and he's able to get, honestly, a lot of the emotion that I'm trying to get, you know. So I very much am a fan of his work. Other than that, I haven't really been on looking at a ton because
there's a photograph on the cover of the New York Times magazine that I wonder your opinion about it. It's a crowd, and then you have one man and you just have his back. So it's as if you are him standing out facing a crowd. But I'd love to hear, like, sometime after the call, what you think of that shot and the shots that are being sort of like elevated. I want to talk to you about emotions, and you did get a question too, but what range of emotions are you seeing in people at the protests? And how do you go about capturing that?
Again, it's hard to capture the emotion except for from a distance, because I don't want to be up in people's faces, just because I don't think, it's appropriate as a photographer, and I don't think that they would enjoy it. But obviously anger is one of the main ones that I'm seeing in people's faces. And again, it depends on what type. Like the protest that I'm about to join here is a very family friendly, and so I expect more just anger, yes, but I expect more just kind of peacefully walking, maybe chanting, but not necessarily yelling with anger in their voice, like the other ones have been. But then also just people crying. I mean, there's one picture that I took. I don't know if you looked through all of my photos or not, but which is obviously fine if you didn't. But one picture that I took that showed a couple hugging each other from behind, and they both had their phones up, kind of videoing the crowd and the protest that was going on. And that woman in that picture, that's one of my favorites that I've taken, because that woman in that picture, she is just bawling. She is just boo-hooing on the other side, which I would never disrespect and try to take a picture of that, even though, of course, that's the emotion that we all want to see. But so I just shot her from behind, and but she's just crying, and I've seen lots of tears, lots of anger coming out. I guess it was yesterday or the day before, I was walking around downtown just trying to take some pictures of the aftermath, and there was a news crew there interviewing an African-American family, maybe. I'm not sure what was going on, but I had my camera, so I walked over and just asked, you know, kind of talked to them about it. But this kind of goes back to your question about consent. They were very nervous that I was around with a camera, especially, I guess, since my camera is very professional looking. They were nervous that I was there, and they wanted to know who I was. And obviously I didn't take any pictures, and I told them who I was and said I wasn't there to take pictures because I could tell it was a sensitive, they were interviewing the family about a very sensitive situation apparently, and they wouldn't even tell me what it was about, you know.
Got it.
So I think people are just scared. I've definitely seen a lot of scared people who are afraid to have their face in an image.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you reporting for any news outlets? Are you sending your photos to media?
You know, I did the first set of images that I did. Actually, the Seattle Met published them. So I'm just having to be careful there too. But I really want people to see that there are thousands ready to raise their voice. And honestly, it's my prayer that they're not just raising their voices, but that they're signing the petitions, that they are donating the money to the organizations that we're all seeing online, that they're looking into this. But because if all the people in the crowds were actually donating and actually signing the petitions and voting properly, we would do some damage in this in a good way.
Because there are so many. What did you mean when you said, like, you know how you said your photos appeared in is it the Met Seattle? Did you say?
Seattle Met, the
Seattle
magazine.
Met. When you said I have to be careful there, what did you mean by that?
I don't want them, I'm not going to give them some that, again, it goes back to, I'm not going to even post any that have people's faces, like up close, super recognizable. So I was just careful. The same principle applies to what I give to them as to what I post. Yeah.
Did you see any, let's get to Kasha's question actually. So Kasha asks, have the police been interacting differently with photojournalists this week in your experience?
Again, I can't be there all the time, so I can't really, and I don't know what other photographers are experiencing because I'm not even chatting with them. But I do think, with my experience, I do think that they allow me to do things that they might not allow someone else to do. And I don't know if that's because I'm white or because I have a camera in my hand. But even at one of the big ones, the first big ones downtown last weekend, and that started in Westlake and it turned into looting and such. I was this close to this close. I don't even see that. This close to the cop's face with my camera, taking pictures of them. Like, I wasn't worried about getting the cops' faces on the camera at all. I just went for it with them. But I could get this close to them and they didn't seem to care, which I feel like even people who are protesting and they're that close to the cop's face, the cops care. It is interesting.
Do you think they had gotten like orders that they need to let themselves be photographed? Like, do they have the right to consent when it comes to that?
I have no idea. I'm not a protest photographer or a political photographer, so the biggest thing I know is that I just don't want to capture people's faces where they're recognizable. But I've kind of done what I've always done in terms of where can I go, and that's just go until they tell me not to.
Yeah. Kasha's saying, are they treating photographers differently this week versus last month?
I can't really answer that question because last month I wasn't out there.
Yeah. Did you and your partner have a conversation about whether you should photograph at all? Did you have a debate about your personal risk in going?
Oh, sure. Yeah. At first, my husband was just kind of, he was scared for me. He's like, it's going to turn into looting and cops are throwing these flashbangs. And so we definitely had the conversation, but obviously he knows he wants me there as much as I want to be there. And we think it's worth the risk. Of course I'm smart about it. I definitely, once I felt that the protest was turning into a more looting and like a scary situation, I left.
Yeah.
would I want to shoot? Would I want to capture those moments? Absolutely. But just being a mom of two, and I mean, honestly, just in all disclosure, I was afraid, so
Yeah.
I left.
And what was it
Yeah.
what was it like to navigate the streets with your car when you were trying to leave the protest? Was that easy? Were you stuck behind a barricade? Anything like that?
It was tricky. It was
Yeah.
definitely tricky. Everything was blocked off. I mean, it's still tricky to drive down there. I actually have a very part-time job at an office in that's a block from Westlake. So thankfully, I can just utilize that parking garage. Like, I have a badge to get in the building and so I can actually use my office space as kind of a, you know, a home base, I guess, when I'm down there.
Yeah.
But it was tricky still to get out and get home. Like, I had to,
Yeah.
you know, weasel my way through.
Yeah. And have you seen other photographers out? And like, if so, do you say hi to each other? Do you wave? Is there any acknowledgement among photographers who are out at the protests?
You know, if I made eye contact with any of, I would definitely smile and wave because that's just me.
Yeah.
But it's kind of when you're behind the lens and you're in the crowd, there's not really a whole lot of paying attention to. I'm just looking at what I'm wanting to capture.
Yeah. And what, like, you've touched on this a little bit, but maybe we could talk about it just a little bit more. What motivates you to photograph these moments? Is it like the sense that you're exposing yourself to something that you want to learn? Or is it that you might use these photos later for like a book or in media? What's your intention and motivation to create this body of work?
Sure, yeah. I think the motivation behind anything that we do, the why behind the what, is always such an incredible and important question. There's no intention to make a book or to get to media or, I mean, obviously I'm posting them, but that's just because I want to spread the news about what's going on and try to show the truth about how many people are against the police brutality and racism. So that is my number one goal, I guess, is to show that, to get, because, you know, people say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and this is, you know, we all have something different to bring based on who we are, our upbringing, our personalities, what our hobbies are. We can all bring something to the table. So this is what I can bring to the table to help hopefully push this change forward and bring some reform. And I very much, because this is part of why I'm a photographer, I learned through doing. I learned through my images. And so I knew that if I would notice the emotion, I would notice the pain in the African American community more if I took my camera and was looking for the things that I wanted to portray in a set of images. I have, like, going back through my own images, not because they're so great, but I have been able to ponder on them, and I've sat there and just cried going, oh my gosh. So part of my why behind why I wanted to go was because I knew that would be a way that I could let it sink deep into my heart as I saw the anger, the signs.
I know exactly what you mean. There is something amazing about that view.
Yes.
How long do you expect the protests will last? Like, how many more weeks? What are you anticipating in Seattle?
Based on again, this is part of why I have wanted to go into the protest areas, and to just sit and listen. Like yesterday, I just kind of sat there for a while and listened to the conversations. I just sat down with a couple of groups and just listened to what they were talking about. Based on hearing what I'm hearing and seeing what I'm seeing as far as medical stations and food stations being set up and that sort of thing in different parts of downtown, it seems like they're here to stay for a good while, which I'm so for. I really am. So who knows what this is going to be like, but I know through all of what we've seen across the United States, obviously so much change needs to happen, so much I'm not a political person. I'm very ignorant to a lot of what's going on and how to go about things. But I know it has to be torn down and started over. Like, it just needs to be completely changed. But it seems like it's going to be here for a while, and I do see that there's been some good changes that have started to happen, you know, since all of the protests across the United States in terms of cops being charged. And there's hopefully word is getting out more than ever through social media on how to sign petitions, how to go about making sure that it starts from kind of the local level up, because I think that's important, is that it starts very locally in who we vote for. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It seems like they're here to stay for a while.
Yeah. Kash is asking, don't you think a second wave of coronavirus would affect the protesters?
Yeah, I do. And that makes, you know, all that makes me nervous. It's all stuff that is, I guess, out of our control, and that I just, as a Christian, I pray for and think about. And, you know, again, that's why there's free sites in Seattle for COVID-19 testing. I'm signed up next week to go get that test, because I want to make sure that I'm, you know, thinking about stuff, and I'm taking the precautions on in my house and with the people that I'm around, for them to know that I've been at protest. And
what are the signs or phrases, words, language on posters that you remember seeing that stood out to you?
Oh goodness. I mean, I've seen several, and I'm sure you have too. A lot of them are kind of the same across social media, but some of the ones that stood out to me initially, especially that first protest, were just signs that said, "I am a man." And I thought, oh my gosh. Yeah, you know, like that's never had to cross my mind or my white husband's mind, of having to tell the world that they're a man, treat me like that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So that was one that stood out. There was one, and this is not one that I saw personally, but just came across online, but that to learn about racism is a privilege versus experiencing it your whole life. And I thought that was really good, because that is true. Like, I'm not experiencing, like, racism is not happening to me. I'm learning about it. And that just, you know, so that one was one that hit me pretty hard. I mean, those are the two that come to mind. There's probably more. Well, there was one big one I actually took a picture of yesterday, and I posted it on my story, that says, "Why do we have to keep saying Black Lives Matter?" And it's like, yeah, why do we have to keep saying that? This is insane that we have to keep saying that somebody matters. Yeah. Yeah, those are a few that come to mind.
If somebody's watching now who lives in Seattle, or someone watches later who lives in Seattle, and they want to know, where would you drive your car to? Where would you go to get a slice of what's happening, to get a little bit of the protest, the language that people are using, the groups that are gathering? Where would you recommend? What cross street?
They're down at Kyle Anderson Park is where the barricade is set up in Capitol Hill. So at gosh, I'm terrible with directions, but it's the corner of Cal Anderson. I don't know actually what street that is. Anyway, it's at the corner of Cal Anderson, near the precinct there in Capitol Hill. So it's right there. I want to say it's the south corner, one of the south corners, but then also down at Westlake in downtown on, I guess that's Pine and Fifth, maybe. That's where I work too. So that's always has people walking around and protesters around and cops around. And so those are the two main places, but I know there are other places too. Like, I'm here in Shoreline today, because I live in North Seattle. So this is where I'm bringing my daughter to march today.
What is what is your favorite photograph that you've taken so far?
Probably that one that I was mentioning earlier, the one that is has the couple hugging, and just because I know that the woman on the other side is just hurting and like in a lot of pain, so that's a constant reminder to me when I see that our African community and our friends are just hurting. They're in a lot of pain, and they need our love and our support, and for us to stand up for them and do what we can do. So I think that one's probably my favorite so far.
At the protest you've been to, is there a lot of diversity?
There is. Yeah, there definitely. I mean, I've seen a lot of diversity. Even I guess this is another favorite photo. There was another photo that I took of some Asian people walking with a big sign with like Asian tigers on it that said Asians for Blacks, or Asians for Black Lives.
That's cool.
And I thought that was really cool.
That is cool. Has this experience made you want to get more involved with organizations like the ACLU, BLM, etc.?
Oh my gosh, yeah, 100%. And that's one of the things where I've had to just kind of search my own heart and know and see where my own blind spots and shortcomings and all of this is, my own, where I've contributed to the problem. And that is part of where I've contributed to this, is by not being a part of so many of those. So absolutely, yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Marguerite, for having me.
I hope today goes well. Yeah.
So you know, it's Jana.
Jana, not Yana. Okay.
Yeah, which I get called Yana all the time, so I'm totally
Jana.
used to it, and I just remembered it just now. But thank you.
Very good. Well, it's great to meet you, Jenna. Thank you so much for your work and your service.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.